The night was eerily quiet, with only the distant chirp of crickets filling the cool air. The soft glow of the moon bathed the landscape in an ethereal light. But there was something different about this night, something unsettling. Nathan Harris stood on the porch of his cabin, the warm mug of coffee in his hands, offering him little comfort. He wasn't one for superstitions or believing in things he couldn't explain. But tonight, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that didn't belong here. He glanced at his watch. 12:43 a.m. The woods surrounding his small property were vast, the nearest neighbor miles away. If anything, this place was as remote as it got. Nathan liked it that way. He had come here to escape the chaos of city life, the noise, the expectations. Out here, in the silence of the forest, he could hear himself think. But tonight, the stillness felt wrong. A sudden flash of light broke the monotony. It came from the edge of the woods, streaking across the sky in a way that didn't look like any meteor or shooting star he had ever seen. Nathan's heart skipped a beat as he squinted. Into the distance, the light growing brighter, sharper, until it turned into a fiery trail. He stared in disbelief, unable to process what he was seeing. His first thought was that it was some kind of military aircraft, but it was moving far too erratically, far too quickly, and the streak of light was too vivid, too unnatural. His instinct kicked in before his brain could catch up. He dropped the coffee, hearing the ceramic crack against the wooden floorboards of the porch, and ran toward the woods. The light was almost blinding now, and then it vanished. Just like that. Gone. But the silence remained. Only now it was different. It wasn't the calm kind of quiet Nathan had grown accustomed to. It was a heavy silence, thick with anticipation, as though something was waiting just beyond the trees. Nathan's pulse quickened as he stepped into the woods. His boots crunched against the fallen leaves, but his senses were heightened, alert. The crash site, or whatever had fallen, was just ahead. He could feel it. The ground beneath his feet suddenly shook. The force was so strong it felt like a small earthquake. His body tensed and his breathing hitched. Another flash of light, this one far closer. It was more than just a streak now. It was a force, a presence that had just collided with the earth in a violent, explosive crash. He picked up the pace, weaving between the trees, his mind racing. When he finally reached the clearing, the scene before him made his heart stop. There, in the center of a smoldering crater, lay something that didn't belong. The air around the crash site shimmered, almost as though reality itself was warping around the object. The faint smell of burning metal and something else, something like ozone, lingered in the air. Nathan's eyes widened as he took in the sight. It wasn't a military craft. It wasn't even something from Earth. A ship. A small, alien spacecraft, charred and smoking, lay half-buried in the dirt. It was like nothing he had ever seen before. Sleek, metallic, with sharp edges and a design that defied human understanding. The way it was shaped, the curves. It didn't belong here. It didn't belong in his world. But the strangest thing of all wasn't the ship. It was what, or rather who, lay beside it. A girl. A small alien girl. Nathan froze. His breath caught in his throat as he stepped closer, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. She was unconscious, her pale skin almost glowing in the dim light of the moon. She was breathing, but just barely. Blood stained her clothes. If you could even call them clothes. The material was strange, unlike anything he had ever encountered, shimmering faintly as though it was alive. Her body was bruised, her limbs twisted at odd angles, but there was something impossibly fragile about her. Instinctively, Nathan knelt beside her, his heart pounding in his chest. She was so small, so delicate. Her pointed ears and long, silver hair immediately stood out as alien features, and yet there was something undeniably human about her face. Her eyes, if she had opened them, would have been striking, But as it stood, she was a mystery, lying there in the dirt, as fragile. As a dream, Nathan swallowed hard. This wasn't just some random occurrence. This was something he had never imagined, something he wasn't prepared for. His mind screamed at him to run, to leave before he got involved in something that could ruin his life, maybe even end it. But his heart, the part of him that had always tried to help, refused to let him walk away. He reached out, carefully brushing a strand of her silver hair from her face. It was warm, almost too warm, like her body was burning from within. A deep sense of urgency took hold of him. She needed help, now. Without thinking twice, he carefully lifted her, his muscles straining under her slight weight. The moment his hands touched her, a strange, tingling sensation ran through him, as though her very skin was electric. He gasped and pulled back for a moment, but when he looked down at her face, he saw the smallest twitch of her lips. She was alive. Nathan didn't hesitate this time. He picked her up fully, cradling her in his arms. The girl was light, but her presence was heavy in a way he couldn't explain. It was as if she carried a weight far beyond her physical form, a burden far too great for someone so small. The trek back to his cabin felt like an eternity. Every rustle in the trees, every crack of a twig beneath his boots, made him paranoid. The night felt too quiet, too unnatural. He could sense that someone or something was watching him, but when he looked around, there was nothing but the stillness of the woods. When he finally reached the cabin, he hurried inside, the door slamming shut behind him. He gently laid the girl on the couch, his hands trembling as he tried to assess her condition. There was no sign of her injuries being life-threatening, but the damage was severe. The most puzzling part was the lack of identification or any signs of where she came from. She wasn't wearing any kind of recognizable uniform or clothing from Earth, and her ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. Nathan didn't know what to do next. He didn't know who to call, who to trust. His mind was racing, spinning with a million questions. But for now, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't leave her alone, not like this. As he worked to clean her wounds and stabilize her, he kept glancing at the alien spacecraft outside. His heart kept pounding in his chest. The questions were too many. Who was she? Why had she come here? And why had she crashed on his property of all places? He didn't have answers, yet. But deep down, something told him that this was only the beginning. Suddenly, a sharp beeping sound broke the silence, making Nathan's heart skip a beat. It was coming from the direction of the small communication device he kept in the corner of his cabin. It had been silent for weeks, but now it was flashing red, an urgent signal. He rushed over to it, his fingers trembling as he activated the screen. The device blinked once more, the message flashing across the screen in a language he couldn't understand. His gaze snapped back to the girl on the couch. She was still unconscious, her face peaceful for the moment. But as he studied her, he noticed something strange. Her ears were twitching, and then she moved. The world outside seemed to stand still as Nathan's breath caught in his throat. The girl opened her eyes, wide, glowing, and an unnatural shade of silver, and locked them onto his. In that instant, Nathan realized something that terrified him more than anything else that night. He had just become part of a much larger, much more dangerous mystery than he could have ever imagined. Nathan's pulse hammered in his chest as he stared into the alien girl's eyes, the silver irises glowing faintly in the dim cabin light. There was a strange familiarity about them, something unsettling. It was as though they weren't eyes at all, at least not in any human sense of the word. He had seen animals in distress, but this was different. Her gaze seemed to pierce through him, as though she could see the very essence of who he was. Who are you?" he whispered, not really expecting an answer. He wasn't even sure she could understand him. For a long moment, there was no movement, Her chest rose and fell slowly, her breathing labored as if she was struggling to stay awake. Nathan's instincts told him to back away, to give her space, but something inside of him wouldn't allow it. He couldn't look away. His eyes were drawn to her like a moth to a flame, desperate to understand this incomprehensible situation. Suddenly, the girl blinked. It was so subtle, but Nathan noticed it. Her eyes flickered briefly, as if focusing, and for a split second, they became more intense. Then, in a voice that was quiet but clear, she spoke, not human. Her words sent a shiver down Nathan's spine. The sound of her voice was melodic, but also eerie, like a whisper from a far-off world. Her accent was unlike anything Nathan had ever heard, soft, almost musical, but undeniably alien. Nathan's brain struggled to process the meaning of what she had said. She couldn't be human, that much was clear. But what was she? He leaned, closer, trying to steady his breath, though it was hard with his heart racing like it was. "What are you? Where are you from?" The girl's eyes flickered again, and she seemed to gather her strength, struggling to sit up. She winced as she moved, and Nathan reached out instinctively to support her, but she recoiled slightly at his touch. It wasn't fear, but a kind of restraint, as if she was trying not to show weakness. I don't know." Her voice was barely a whisper, but it made Nathan's heart ache with an unknown sorrow. "I was lost." Nathan nodded slowly, trying to think. This was far beyond anything he had ever experienced. First, the strange craft that fell from the sky, and now an alien girl in his home, one who seemed to have no memory of how she had arrived, or who she truly was. Yet there was a distinct feeling in the air, a sense that there was more to this girl than met the eye. Much more. Before Nathan could ask anything else, the girl's head drooped, her silver hair falling across her face like a veil. She seemed to be slipping back into unconsciousness, but not before she whispered one last thing, "Help me." And with that she closed her eyes, her breathing evening out as she drifted into a deep sleep. Nathan sat back, his mind spinning. The words, "Help me," echoed in his thoughts. He had no idea what he was getting into, no idea how to help her. He was just a man in the woods, a simple cabin owner with no experience dealing with anything like this. But the sincerity in her voice, the fear, stirred something inside him. She wasn't just some curiosity or a passing anomaly. She was real, and she needed his help. But what did help even mean? And how could he offer it when he had no idea where to start? He stood up, pacing around the small cabin, his mind racing through 1,000 possible scenarios. He needed answers, and fast. The first thing he thought of was reaching out to authorities, but no, that was too risky. If they found out about her, they might take her away, study her, and the secrecy of her existence would be lost. Whoever or whatever she was, she didn't belong in the hands of government agencies or any other organization that could exploit her. Nathan knew he had to keep her safe, but he also knew that meant keeping her hidden. He couldn't risk anyone else finding out about her. He had no idea how to protect her from the outside world. He could barely protect himself. He turned back to her, watching her sleep. She looked so fragile, so helpless, but there was power in her, something deeper than he could understand. She had crashed here, in the most remote part of the country, seemingly by accident. But accidents didn't happen like this. She had been sent here for a reason, and that reason was now his responsibility. As the night stretched on, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It was subtle at first, a flicker of movement just outside the window, the snap of a twig underfoot, but it grew more intense with each passing minute. He couldn't tell if it was paranoia or something else entirely, but it felt as though someone or something was tracking his every move. With a sense of urgency, Nathan turned off the lights and drew the blinds. He tried to focus, and calm his racing thoughts, but the unease only grew stronger. The unseen presence hours passed in tense silence, and as the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Nathan was still wide awake. He hadn't left the cabin, hadn't taken his eyes off the girl on the couch. He had tried to make sense of everything, but it was impossible. What he knew for sure was that the world he thought he knew was no longer the same. The strange girl, the alien spacecraft, the feeling of being watched, it all connected somehow. But how? And why had it happened to him? What did the girl mean by not human? And what was this royal secret she seemed to be hiding? As he continued to watch over her, Nathan heard something. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. The soft tapping of footsteps. They were faint but growing louder, coming from outside the cabin. Nathan stiffened, his body freezing as his instincts screamed at him to move, to do something. Whoever or whatever it was, they were close. He had no idea what to do. Should he confront them? Hide? What if it was someone who knew about the alien girl? What if they were dangerous? Before Nathan could act, the door creaked, slowly inching open. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He didn't move, didn't make a sound. Whoever was outside had opened the door with terrifying precision. Nathan could only see the silhouette in the dim light of the morning, but the shape was unmistakable. Someone had found him. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins as the silhouette at the door slowly began to materialize. His mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. He had no plan, no idea what this new threat meant. Was it someone sent to take the alien girl? Someone looking for her? Or was it simply a wanderer, lost in the woods, unaware of the strange events unfolding inside the cabin? His eyes flicked toward the girl on the couch. She was still unconscious, her silver hair tangled and her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The last thing Nathan wanted was to put her in danger. But what could he do? His mind screamed at him to act, but his body was frozen in place, unable to move. The footsteps outside stopped for a moment, and the silence hung thick in the air, making the tension almost unbearable. Nathan strained his ears, listening for any clue as to who or what was behind the door. The air seemed heavier, as if it were holding its breath. And then the door creaked again. This time it opened fully. A man stepped into the cabin, his figure bathed in the soft light filtering through the window. He was tall, with dark, disheveled hair and a rugged, weathered look, his eyes sharp and calculating. But what struck Nathan the most was the sense of urgency in the man's demeanor, his movements quick but controlled. He seemed to know exactly where he was going. Nathan instinctively moved to block the girl on the couch, placing himself between her and the stranger. His pulse raced and every muscle in his body tensed, ready for a confrontation. The man didn't appear to have any weapon, but Nathan couldn't be sure. "Who are you?" Nathan demanded, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his chest. "What do you want?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced around the cabin, his gaze flicking to the girl on the couch, then back to Nathan. There was something about him that felt out of place. He wasn't just a random stranger. There was a calculated edge to him, like he had been following a trail, waiting for the right moment to strike. "I don't have time to explain everything," the man said, his voice low and smooth, but tinged with an urgency that made Nathan's instincts scream to stay on guard. "But you need to listen to me. There are people coming for her." Nathan's stomach tightened. "Who are you talking about? What do you know about her?" he asked, his voice firm now, demanding answers. The man's eyes narrowed. "Not her," he corrected. "Them." Nathan was confused, his brow furrowing. "Them? What do you mean?" The man exhaled sharply, clearly frustrated with Nathan's lack of understanding. "She's not just some lost little girl. She's royalty, alien royalty. And you've put yourself in a position you can't get out of by bringing her in here." Nathan's brain was struggling to process the words the man had just spoken. Royalty, alien royalty. His mind was spinning and he couldn't make sense of it all. "Look, I don't know who you are or what you're talking about," Nathan said, his voice now tinged with suspicion. "But you're not making any sense. She's just a girl, an orphan, lost and alone, and I found her." The man's eyes flashed with something akin to disbelief, mixed with an intensity that made Nathan's chest tighten. "No," the man said slowly. "She's not just an orphan. She's the last of her kind, the heir to a throne you can't even begin to comprehend. And you've just become a part of something much bigger than you ever imagined." Nathan opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say anything, the man stepped closer, his movements swift and calculated, as though he didn't care if Nathan was in his way or not. "I'm not here to hurt you," the man said, his voice softening. "I'm here to help you, but you need to trust me. You've already made a huge mistake by keeping her here." "Why?" Nathan shot back. "Why is it such a big deal? What's so special about her?" The man took a deep breath, then glanced once more at the girl, his gaze lingering for just a moment longer than Nathan was comfortable with. Then he looked back at Nathan, his eyes sharp, as though searching for something inside him. "Because she doesn't just carry the future of her people," the man said gravely. "She carries the key to their survival, and to your own." Nathan shook his head, his mind a tangled mess of confusion and fear. "I don't understand," he admitted, his voice strained. "I don't even know what's happening anymore. All I know is that she needs help. She's not from around here, and she's hurt, and—" "I know," the man interrupted, his voice softening slightly. "And I'm not blaming you, but you're in over your head. If you want to protect her, you need to listen to me. The people I'm working with, they'll come for her. They'll do whatever it takes to get her. And if they find out she's here, they won't stop until they have her." Nathan's thoughts raced. He didn't know who this man was or how he knew so much about the alien girl, but something about his urgency felt real. This wasn't a random person stumbling into his cabin. This man had been searching for something, or someone, and Nathan had unwittingly put himself in the middle of it. Before Nathan could respond, the man's eyes flicked toward the window and his face tightened. Nathan followed his gaze and saw the shadow of movement outside, a figure passing quickly in front of the cabin. Nathan's heart stopped. They weren't alone. "We don't have much time," the man said, his voice low and urgent. "They're here. They've found us. The hunt begins." Nathan's body froze. His mind screamed at him to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The cabin, secluded as it was, felt like it was shrinking around him. Whoever these people were, they weren't just looking for a little girl. They were hunting something far more dangerous. Without thinking, Nathan grabbed the man by the arm, pulling him toward the back of the cabin. "We need to move her," he said, his voice low and frantic. "Get her somewhere safe." The man didn't resist. He nodded grimly and followed Nathan toward the girl on the couch. He seemed to be familiar with the situation, his eyes scanning the room quickly, taking in every detail, as though calculating the best possible course of action. Nathan gently shook the girl, trying to rouse her from her sleep. She stirred, her eyes flickering open, and for a brief moment she seemed confused, disoriented. But then her gaze focused on him, and her silver eyes seemed to see right through him, as if she understood everything in that moment. "Help," she whispered again, her voice hoarse. Nathan glanced at the man, who nodded grimly. "We don't have much time. If we don't move her now, it'll be too late." Nathan's heart clenched. He didn't fully understand what was going on, but one thing was clear. The danger was real, and it was closing in. The man pulled a small device from his jacket and activated it, revealing a holographic map. He studied it for a moment, then looked back at Nathan. "There's a place nearby, a safe house. We can get her there before they arrive." Nathan didn't question the man's words. He couldn't. The urgency in the man's tone, the cold realization of how much danger they were in, it was all too much to ignore. "We need to go now," the man urged. Nathan nodded, his heart racing. He lifted the girl into his arms, her fragile form feeling like the weight of the world on his shoulders. As he followed the man out the back door, he glanced over his shoulder at the cabin one last time, his mind torn between fear and determination. They were running now, and the hunt had just begun. The night air was thick with the scent of pine and the chill that came with the fall of dusk. Nathan's breath came in sharp, visible bursts as he carefully carried the alien girl through the dense forest, following the man who had arrived at the cabin. The leaves crunched beneath their feet, and the shadows of the towering trees seemed to stretch and twist as if alive. There was an eerie stillness around them, nothing but the occasional rustling of the leaves in the wind. The forest felt like an old, forgotten place, the kind that had seen generations of secrets buried within it. Every step Nathan took felt heavier than the last. He had no idea what he was walking into, no idea who these people were or why they were after the girl. His mind was spinning with questions, but one thing was clear: time was running out. The man had spoken with a sense of urgency that Nathan couldn't ignore. The sense of danger that had been present since the girl arrived was growing stronger by the minute. The girl, still cradled in his arms, stirred slightly but didn't wake. Her delicate silver hair brushed against his arm, a strange and alien sensation. It was the kind of thing that felt surreal, like he was caught in a dream, or worse, a nightmare. "Almost there," the man said, his voice low but full of intensity. "Stay alert." Nathan nodded, though his thoughts were racing. He glanced at the man who had an air of confidence, as though he knew exactly where they were headed. But Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He still didn't know who this man was, or why he was so sure of the girl's significance. The word royalty kept echoing in his mind, but he pushed it aside. There were more pressing things to worry about. Suddenly, the man stopped in his tracks, and Nathan almost bumped into him. The man's hand shot up, signaling for silence. Nathan froze, his body going rigid. He listened intently, but the only sound he could hear was the beating of his own heart. "I heard something," the man whispered, barely audible. Nathan strained his ears, trying to make out any sound, but the forest seemed unnaturally quiet. A few moments passed before the man spoke again. "They're close," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to move faster." Nathan felt the weight of the girl shift slightly in his arms. He adjusted his grip, trying to steady her, but something felt wrong. There was a shift in the atmosphere, a sudden sense of being watched. His stomach churned with anxiety. Without warning, the man turned abruptly, his feet barely touching the ground as he sprinted through the trees. Nathan followed instinctively, though his mind was clouded with uncertainty. Was this man leading them to safety, or was he part of whatever pursuit they were running from? They moved quickly through the forest, the girl still unconscious in Nathan's arms. The path ahead seemed to twist and turn, each step taking them deeper into the unknown. Nathan's breathing became more labored, the air thicker, the shadows more oppressive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached a small clearing. In the center of it stood a structure that was barely visible in the low light. It looked like an old abandoned cabin, similar to the one they had just left, but this one had an ominous, almost otherworldly feel to it. The wood was dark and weathered, the windows blackened with age, and the door was slightly ajar as if beckoning them inside. "This is it," the man said, his voice low but resolute. Nathan hesitated for a moment before stepping toward the door. There was something about the cabin that didn't sit right with him, but the man was already inside, and Nathan had no choice but to follow. He carefully stepped inside, the door creaking shut behind him with an unsettling finality. The interior of the cabin was dimly lit, But what stood out the most was the technology. Strange, almost alien devices were scattered throughout the room. Holographic maps, glowing panels, and other technology that Nathan couldn't even begin to comprehend. It was as if the cabin were a makeshift command center, not a place to rest. "Put her down here," the man instructed, gesturing toward a large metal table that looked like it belonged in a lab rather than a cabin. Nathan reluctantly placed the girl on the table, the surface cold against her skin. He stepped back, his mind reeling. What was this place? Why was it filled with such advanced technology? The man went to a nearby console and began typing quickly on a holographic interface. Nathan watched him closely, trying to make sense of everything, but his mind kept drifting back to the girl. She was still unconscious, her breathing steady, but Nathan could see the faint tremor in her fingers, as if something deep inside her was stirring. "I'm going to need you to stay calm," the man said, not looking up from the console. "We don't have much time. The people who are after her, they won't stop until they have her." Nathan shook his head. "I still don't understand. Who are they? Why do they want her?" The man paused for a moment, then turned to face him. "They're part of an organization, a powerful one, that controls most of the galaxy. They're called the Exarchs. And they want the girl because she's the last of a royal bloodline that predates even their rule. Her family was destroyed, but she's the key to bringing it all back." Nathan's mind was spinning. "Wait, so she's not just an orphan? She's the last of an alien royal family?" The man nodded gravely. "Exactly, and that's why they'll stop at nothing to find her. She's more valuable to them than you could ever imagine." Nathan's eyes darted to the girl on the table. He had no idea how to process all of this. An alien royal family, the Exarchs. He was way in over his head, but he couldn't turn back now. Not after everything that had happened. "And you," Nathan said, a question forming in his mind. "Who are you? Why are you helping her?" The man's face hardened. "I'm part of a group that opposes the Exarchs. We've been fighting them for years. They control everything, but they don't know about the girl. If they did, they'd destroy everything in their path to capture her." Nathan nodded slowly, trying to piece everything together. The girl wasn't just a lost child. She was the key to something much bigger. And Nathan had no idea what role he played in it. But one thing was certain, he couldn't let her fall into the wrong hands. Suddenly, the cabin door slammed open, and a burst of cold air swept through the room. Nathan's heart skipped a beat. Someone had found them. The man spun around, his eyes wide with shock. "They're here!" Before Nathan could react, the man reached for a nearby panel, hitting a series of buttons. The room lit up with a series of warning lights, and a low hum filled the air. Nathan's mind raced, but before he could make sense of what was happening, the door to the cabin slammed shut with a resounding thud. "You have to get her out of here," the man said urgently, grabbing Nathan by the arm. "Now! Move!" Nathan didn't hesitate. He grabbed the girl from the table and turned to run. The man led the way, his movements swift and sure, but Nathan felt the weight of the situation closing in on him. There was no more time for questions. The Exarchs were closing in, and everything had just become much more dangerous. The hunt was no longer a distant threat. It was here. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest, each beat like a drum of impending doom. He barely noticed the cool wind whipping through the trees as he ran, cradling the unconscious alien girl in his arms. The cabin behind them was already lost in the dark depths of the forest, and he had no idea where they were going. He trusted the man leading them, but he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The man moved quickly, his steps calculated and efficient. Nathan struggled to keep up, his breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. It was as though the forest itself was closing in on them. The trees, thick and ancient, seemed to lean toward them, casting dark, elongated shadows in the moonlight. The ground was uneven, and Nathan's legs burned from the effort. "Keep moving!" the man shouted over his shoulder, his voice sharp with urgency. "We don't have much time." Nathan pushed himself harder, his muscles screaming in protest. His mind was a blur, caught between the weight of the girl in his arms, the overwhelming sense of danger surrounding them, and the nagging thought that something far bigger than him was at play here. The Exarchs, the royal bloodline, this girl who seemed like an innocent orphan, was somehow at the center of it all. As they pushed deeper into the forest, the man led them to a clearing. In the middle of it stood a structure, a large, sleek, metallic ship that gleamed in the moonlight. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The ship was unlike any human technology he had encountered, its shape organic, almost alive. The surface shimmered with strange symbols that glowed faintly, and the whole thing seemed to hum with an energy that made the hair on the back of Nathan's neck stand on end. "That's our escape," the man said, not breaking his stride as he led them toward the ship. "We need to get her inside. It's the only way." Nathan's mind raced. He had so many questions. Why was the ship here? How did this man know about it? And what was it about this girl that made her so important? The answers seemed to be just out of reach, like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. He didn't have the luxury of questioning any longer. The man reached the ship first, slamming his hand against a panel on the side. A series of soft clicks sounded as the ship's hatch opened, revealing a narrow passageway. The man gestured for Nathan to hurry. "Inside. Now." Without a word, Nathan followed him, his body moving on instinct. The inside of the ship was as strange as the outside. Surfaces that seemed to shift and pulse with a life of their own, walls that shimmered like liquid. It was unlike any technology Nathan had ever seen, even in the most advanced human spaceships. The ship felt alien, alive almost. Nathan moved deeper into the vessel, following the man through the winding corridors. The air was thick with a strange scent, like ozone and something metallic. He could feel the hum of the ship beneath his feet, and it seemed to vibrate with a low, almost comforting energy, but there was no time to appreciate it. The girl was still unconscious, and they were not safe yet. "We're almost there," the man said, glancing over his shoulder. His voice was tight with urgency. "Once we reach the control room, we can jump." "Jump?" Nathan asked, confusion unclouding his thoughts. "Slipstream," the man explained quickly. "This ship is capable of jumping between dimensions. The Exarchs can't track us once we're out of this space." Nathan's mind reeled. Slipstream? Dimensions? He didn't have time to process it. He had no choice but to trust the man. The pounding of their footsteps echoed through the ship as they moved deeper, winding around corridors that seemed to stretch and twist endlessly. Finally, they reached a large chamber at the heart of the ship. It was bathed in soft, ethereal light, and in the center of it stood a glowing console. The man moved quickly, inputting a series of commands into the console, his hands a blur. Nathan stood at the threshold, still holding the girl in his arms. His eyes darted around the room, every instinct screaming that something was off. A sense of dread gnawed at him, like a shadow lurking just beyond his vision. He glanced back over his shoulder, feeling as though they were being watched. The man turned back to him, his expression grim. "We have to initiate the jump now. If we don't, we won't make it." Nathan nodded, but a wave of uncertainty crashed over him. "Are we safe here? What about the Exarchs?" "We'll be safe," the man said, "but we need to act fast." Before Nathan could respond, a sudden noise echoed through the ship, a deep mechanical thrum that reverberated through the walls. The hum of the ship grew louder, and the air seemed to crackle with energy. Nathan's heart skipped a beat. The Exarchs had found them. It was only a matter of time before they breached the ship's defenses. The man glanced up, his face tight with concentration. "Hurry! Initiating jump now!" The console flared with light, and the room around them seemed to shift, as though reality itself were bending. Nathan felt a strange pull in his chest, like something was tugging him into another world. His stomach lurched, and he almost lost his balance. And then the world exploded into blinding light. An unknown world. When Nathan opened his eyes again, everything was different. The ship was no longer surrounded by the dense forest of Earth. Instead, they were drifting through what seemed to be an endless expanse of shimmering light and swirling colors, like the very fabric of space was being stretched and twisted around them. The stars outside the ship were unlike any Nathan had ever seen, burning with an intensity that almost seemed unnatural. The man looked up from the console, his face set in grim determination. "We've made it." Nathan didn't respond immediately. His mind was reeling from the jump, the sheer disorientation of it all. They had just crossed into another dimension, another world. What now? Nathan asked, his voice hoarse. "Now we wait," the man said, "for the Exarchs to give up and for us to plan our next move." But Nathan knew something had changed. They were no longer safe. The Exarchs would come after them. The hunt had just begun. He glanced down at the girl in his arms. Her eyes flickered open for the first time since they had fled the cabin. She was awake. Nathan held her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. The journey ahead would be long, but there was no turning back now. The girl looked up at him, her expression still dazed. But there was something in her eyes now, a flicker of recognition, a glimmer of something far greater than either of them understood. Nathan didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since he found her, he knew one thing for certain. Shatkul story was far from over. The ship drifted quietly through the unfamiliar dimension, its hum a constant undercurrent to the stillness around them. Nathan stood by the window, watching the strange stars twinkle outside. His thoughts were scattered, his mind still struggling to comprehend everything that had happened. The girl, whose name he still didn't know, lay on a bench in the next room, her gaze distant. She hadn't said much since they made the jump, but Nathan could feel the weight of her silence. What happens now? Nathan muttered to himself, his reflection in the window staring back at him, just as lost as he felt. The man, who had been guiding them, walked into the room, breaking Nathan's reverie. His expression was more solemn than ever. "We're not safe yet. The Exarchs are relentless, and if they find us, they'll stop at nothing to bring her back. And if they do—" Nathan turned sharply, the man's voice cutting through his fog of uncertainty. "What happens if they get her?" he asked. The man sighed, looking out at the swirling void outside the ship's windows. "You won't like it. The Exarchs don't simply take prisoners. They control her bloodline. And if they reclaim her, they'll use her as a weapon. You have no idea what she's capable of." Nathan swallowed hard, dread settling in his chest. He knew this wasn't just some stray orphan girl. The secrets she carried were far beyond his comprehension. "What does that mean? What is she really?" Nathan asked, trying to wrap his mind around it all. The man turned slowly to face him. "She's the last of a royal bloodline that was thought to be extinct. The Exarchs are hunting her because her lineage holds the key to the ultimate power. Power that could change the fate of not just her world, but every world." Nathan blinked, processing the weight of the man's words. "You mean she's not human?" "No, she's not," the man said, his voice grave. "She's an Exarch, or at least part of one. The bloodline is ancient, older than the Exarchs themselves. It was hidden away, erased, to prevent it from being used. But someone found her, someone desperate enough to use her. That's why the Exarchs want her so badly." Nathan's heart raced as he tried to piece it all together. He'd always known there was something different about the girl, something that didn't quite fit. But this was beyond anything he could have imagined. She wasn't just an orphan. She was a royal heir. And her blood was worth more than he could ever understand. "Why me?" Nathan asked, his voice trembling. Why did you bring her to me?" The man hesitated, as though weighing his words carefully. "Because you're human. The Exarchs have underestimated you. They think you're just a bystander in all of this. They don't realize what you're capable of when you fight for something you believe in." Nathan's mind swirled with confusion. He didn't know if he was brave or foolish for agreeing to take the girl in, but he had done it, and now the universe was closing in on them, and he was caught in the middle of something far larger than himself. "Is there anything we can do?" Nathan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "There is," the man said, his eyes narrowing, "but it's going to require everything you have." The decision. Nathan spent the next few hours deep in thought, his mind racing through the possibilities. There had to be a way out of this. But as he looked at the girl lying on the bench, her chest rising and falling steadily, he realized that the path forward wasn't as clear as it seemed. The ship had stopped moving, drifting through the vast unknown of space, and Nathan knew they were in a temporary safe zone. But how long would that last? The girl stirred as the man moved away, walking toward the control panel. Nathan watched her for a moment, and she looked at him with eyes that seemed older than her years. Her gaze was intense, and for a moment it felt as though she could see through him, straight to the heart of his doubts. "You can't keep running," she said, her voice soft but firm. Nathan froze. The words struck him like a lightning bolt. He had been running. From the moment she had appeared on his doorstep, he had been running from the truth, from the danger, from everything he didn't understand. "What do you mean?" Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're not just protecting me, you're protecting everyone," she said, her voice full of quiet determination. "The Exarchs won't stop until they have me, but they don't know what I can do, and neither do you." Nathan's pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I don't need to run anymore. I need to fight." The revelation. The girl sat up, her movements slow but deliberate, and the room seemed to grow still as she spoke. "My bloodline isn't just royal. It's more than that. It holds the power to shape worlds, to control reality itself. The Exarchs know this. That's why they want me. They think they can control me. But they're wrong." Nathan's mind reeled, trying to keep up with the gravity of her words. "But how do you know this?" "I've been hiding it. The power is inside me, but it's dormant. I didn't know how to access it until now." She paused, locking eyes with him. "I need you to trust me. We can't keep running. We need to stop the Exarchs before they turn me into something I don't want to be." Nathan was stunned. She had been hiding this from him all along. The power she possessed was unimaginable, and yet she was still just a scared girl, trying to survive. "How do we stop them?" Nathan asked, his voice urgent. The girl stood, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "I can use my power, but I'll need your help. Together, we can create a weapon strong enough to destroy the Exarch's grip on me." Nathan's heart pounded. He didn't know how, but he could feel the truth in her words. This was no longer just about protecting her. It was about saving the future, his future, everyone's future. "I'm ready," he said, stepping forward. The final battle. The ship hummed as the girl began to focus, her eyes closing as she reached deep inside herself. Nathan stood by her side, his heart racing, unsure of what would happen next. The air around them seemed to shift, the ship's walls vibrating with an energy that was not entirely human. The man stepped back, watching from a distance. He didn't speak, but his expression was full of respect. This was the moment they had been waiting for. "Are you ready?" the girl asked, her voice a whisper now. Nathan nodded, taking her hand. He had no idea what was about to happen, but he knew he had to see this through. The ship's control panel flickered and hummed as the girl's power surged. The room filled with a blinding light, and for a moment, Nathan felt as though the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. His vision blurred and the world seemed to collapse in on itself. And then, with a force that shook the very foundations of the ship, a pulse of energy shot out from the girl, enveloping everything in its path. The ship groaned, the walls warping under the pressure of her power. Nathan clung to her, his body shaking from the intensity. Outside, the Exarch's ships appeared, their dark forms looming against the swirling void of space. But as they moved, the girl's energy exploded outward, creating a protective barrier around them. The Exarch's ships faltered, their weapons failing as they were pushed back by the sheer force of her power. Nathan watched in awe as the Exarch's fleet scattered, their ships unable to withstand the power of the girl's bloodline. The girl's eyes were wide open now, her expression fierce and determined. "It's over," she whispered, her voice full of finality, and just like that, the battle was won. Epilogue. The beginning of a new era. The Exarchs were defeated, their power broken, and the girl's royal bloodline reclaimed. Nathan stood by her side as they watched the stars from the ship's observation deck. The universe was vast and the future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They had changed the course of history. The girl turned to him, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thank you," she said softly. Nathan smiled back, his heart full of hope. It's just the beginning. And as they set course for new worlds, they knew one thing for certain. The adventure was far from over. The end